Alright guys, it's time. Over the last year or so, I've been working hard at growing my drone company, New England Drone Tours, and with the nice weather finally here, things have really started ramping up with the FPV real estate projects. So a little bit about New England Drone Tours. We specialize in single-take interior and exterior drone tours filmed on Cinewhoops, like this one, and we service all of New England. I'll occasionally post flight footage from some of the projects on this channel, and you guys are always wanting behind the scenes content, camera settings, what my setup is. There's a lot that goes into making these videos. Too much for one single video. So this one that you're watching right now is the first video in a series that I will be posting where I'll go over my entire process for real estate FPV and cover as much as I can. So in this video, I'm gonna break down the gear that I use almost daily for real estate FPV. So let's get right into it. To carry everything, I have a Torval Pit Stop Pro and a Nanook 923 Pelican style case that holds the drones. My backpack has pretty much everything I could possibly need in it. It's got goggles, controller, portable soldering iron, backup cables, batteries, props, memory cards. I'm not gonna go over everything I keep in here. I'm just gonna touch on the stuff that I use most for the real estate gigs. But this backpack holds a lot. I always take this laptop with me in case I need to do some on-the-go programming. Luckily, I haven't had to use it yet, but it's just kind of peace of mind knowing that I have it. I picked this up from someone on Craigslist for like 40 bucks, and it literally just sits in the backpack and has Betaflight, BL Heli, and all those programs on it. So let's get into the actual gear. The first thing I'm going to talk about is my goggles. Now, when I started out, I used analog, but I quickly found that I would lose video when flying in larger properties, even with this rapid fire module. Since this is a service that is more geared towards larger properties or venues, you really need the best penetration and range you can get. And I'm sure there are analog setups out there that would work great, but I have noticed that digital is significantly better for this type of work. Not only is penetration better, but the image quality is just 100 times clearer. And when you're flying in someone's house, you don't want to hit anything. I have a set of iFlight antennas on here, but the stock antennas work good too. With these iFlight antennas, I do notice slightly better penetration in buildings, plus I can store the goggles with the antennas all installed, which just makes setup and storage a lot easier. I do keep the original antennas on hand just as backup. Typically, I'll run my digital setups at 500 milliwatts no matter what the size of the property is. Next up, my controller. I used this QX7 for a while, but I recently upgraded to this Ethics Mambo. I floated between R9M, ELRS, and Crossfire protocols, and Crossfire is honestly my favorite. It's reliable, I get great range, and it just works. R9M, I had endless issues with. ELRS I am a big fan of, and I do have quite a few drones that actually have Beta FPV Nano RXs on them. So for those drones, I do use this controller with the Beta FPV Micro TX, and I actually have a whole video on setting that up, and I'll link that down below. Otherwise, most of my drones have TBS Crossfire receivers, and I have a Micro TX module on the back of my Mambo. Okay, now to the part you guys have really been waiting for, the drones that I use. My go-to drone for the residential real estate gigs is this custom-built 2.5-inch Cinewhoop on the Cinelog25 frame with a naked GoPro 8 on top. You can't really see it, but the board that's in here is a JHEMCU F4 all-in-one board with 40 amp ESCs. The motors are HGLRC Aeolus 1404 3600 kV motors, and the props that I use are Gemfans 5-blade props. I do like the HQ prop 8-blade props, but normally I'll run these 5-blade Gemfans. Both are pretty quiet as far as an FPV prop goes. So this Hero 8 is soft mounted right here, and this also holds the FPV camera. These grommets really help dampen the GoPro, and you get a lot less jello when you're stabilizing your footage. On the very bottom, you can kind of see it down there, I have a Caddx Vista. I personally prefer these Cherry antennas. These ones I feel like I get better range with than the new ones that they're including, which are these. Maybe it's just me, I don't know. I just noticed that I get better reception with these antennas as opposed to these. The main reason that I built this drone on the Cinelog25 frame is because it's one of the few frames that actually keeps everything in a stack in the middle. A lot of other frames have the Caddx Vista mounted in the back here, and when your center of gravity is off like that, it can actually make it a little more difficult to fly, as opposed to when it's completely straight in line like that, it just makes it a little easier to fly. Now, the battery that I use depends on the size of the property. I usually fluctuate between these 3 batteries. All of them are 4S, but for larger properties, I'll use either an 850 or a 750, and for smaller properties, I use a 650. On a 650 battery like this, I'll get about 5 minutes on this drone, whereas when I'm using a 750 or an 850, I'll get anywhere from 6 to 7 minutes. I think of the 3 batteries, this is my favorite. In addition to this drone, which is my main drone, I do have a backup, and the backup is a 2.5-inch Holy Bro Copus. Since this is a pre-built drone, I'm not going to go over any stats on it. If you're interested in the flight controller, motors, anything like that, you can click the link down in the description and you can just kind of read about it. The only thing that I modified on this was this dampened mount right here. The one that comes on this drone is kind of bulky and weird, and I don't think it actually mounted to this camera mount. So I basically just kind of built my own, and it's dampened now just like that one, and it just makes for a good backup. If you can, always have a backup drone in case something happens to your main drone. So as a part of this entire real estate FPV playlist that I'm making, I'm going to be building a 2.5-inch Cinewhoop just like these that's specifically for real estate shooting. And in that video, I'll include my rates and general settings. That drone is going to have slightly different equipment inside than this one, but it's going to be capable of 6S, and I'm hopeful that it will be able to carry a full-size GoPro. So keep an eye out for that video in the future. So these are what I use for all the residential FPV videos. Since these 2.5-inch drones don't do well in wind and they have a slower top speed, when I'm flying in larger facilities, I like to use my 3-inch Cinewhoops. So here is my Shendrone Squirt V2. I actually have 2 of them. There really isn't too big of a size difference from this to the 2.5-inch drones, and this one is able to carry a full-size GoPro no problem. Since it is bigger and it is heavier, I'll only use these really on bigger projects. These are both pretty similar setups. They both have a Caddx Vista on it. This one has a 20x20 F7 Mamba stack in it and 1507 2700 kV motors. And I'm also using the GemFam 5-blade props on this drone. These are the 3-inch props they make, just trimmed down to fit in the ducts. Another 3-inch Cinewhoop that I've been using quite a bit is the Pavo 30 Pro, which I actually have a whole build video for, and I'll leave a link to that down in the description. This one honestly fits in my case perfectly since the frame is so thin. I can just kind of put it on top of one of the other drones and it's fine. And it's just nice to have a backup 3-inch Cinewhoop on hand. I've used it on a couple projects and I love how it flies. Since these Cinewhoops are all capable of 6S, my go-to battery is a Tattoo 6S 1050. This is a very compact and light 6S battery, and I get a lot of juice from it. I get about 5 to 6 minutes of flight, and I think it's just perfect for Cinewhoops. So that's pretty much my go-to setup for the real estate gigs. This is my daily residential real estate drone, and it performs great. I've had a couple people reach out asking how I keep the drone so stable when I'm flying in such a tight space and if there's sensors on it. There's no sensors on this. It really just comes down to a lot of practice. The tune and setup obviously does play a role, but practice plays an even bigger role. Also, if you're going to film real estate videos like this, I highly recommend getting some door stops. These are 2 that I just printed in TPU, and you have no idea how much these things have come in handy. Sometimes wind can shut doors while you're flying and all of a sudden the shot's ruined. So having door stops like this prevents it. I've actually even used these to prop open windows. Alright, so that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully you guys found it interesting. I will leave a parts list down below for all of the parts that I use in this build and this build. And like I mentioned, I will have a whole 2.5-inch Cinewhoop build video coming out in the coming months. It'll be very similar to this. Like I said, it'll be capable of 6S and hopefully capable of carrying a full-size GoPro. But that will be out in the coming months in this FPV real estate playlist. And in that, I'll show you guys my beta flight rates and my controller setup and all that good stuff. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, like this video, and if you have any questions, leave it down below. I do my best to reply to as many as I can.